Hi, this is David Peters, former hospital corpsman that spent a lifetime 1 year in Vietnam. And this is part 3 of my story in Vietnam. This is part 3. And last time we talked about Operation Tuscaloosa. And that was my introduction to being shot at, to being threatened, to seeing what war was really about. And today I was thinking about the saying, there's no atheists in a foxhole. Well, I can guarantee you, I wasn't an atheist, but it sure made me believe that God was right there protecting us. And there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't realize when someone goes to war, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. There is so much involved in this. And I had a class once that talked about an open system, and this certainly is an example of that. To get everything that a person needs to go to war and do the best job they can is a tremendous undertaking. We're halfway around the world. We need all kinds of things on a daily basis to try to keep us alive and safe. And just think of the enormity when you have how many 100,000 people in a war zone, all needing things like utility uniforms that will hold up walking through rice paddies. You need jungle boots to protect your feet, whether it's hot and dry or cold and wet. You need flak jackets that would protect you from flying shrapnel and maybe even bullets. You need helmets. You need haversacks to carry your gear. You need the daily stuff, like if you're going to do a jungle patrol and not have any resupply, you have to carry enough water and food for however long you expect to be out in that environment. And this is an ongoing thing every single day. And the cost of that has to be tremendous. And it's funny because when we look at the United States Marine Corps and compare it to the United States Army, well, the Marine Corps was always on the low end of the totem pole when it comes to fighting gear and everything else. So you always were striving to get a hold of stuff from the Army to give to the Marines. The Army had better food to eat. They had long-range rations versus sea rations. They had better equipment. They had more of it. The Marine Corps might have had 15 helicopters in the whole inventory, whereas the Army would fly 15 helicopters in one bunch, spread out in an area, and then you multiply that times all of the areas in Vietnam, and it was absolutely tremendous. So when we got done with Operation Tuscaloosa, I came back to the 1st Med Battalion. They often called it Charlie Med. And I knew that I didn't want to become a member of an infantry unit, commonly called the Grunts, or their military occupation specialty number is 0311. If you ask a Marine if he was in 0311, he'll be delighted that you know what that is. And they had the pride in that person because of their training and their whole outlook on the military and everything. There were extremely few draftees in the Marine Corps. So their pride in being volunteer enlistees was higher than some poor guy in the Army that got drafted. So back at First Med, I was working on a gastrointestinal ward. It was a small hooch that had probably 20 cots in it, and we were always very busy because a lot of those grunts would get so thirsty that they would take a drink out of a rice paddy, and that was a bad thing to do because that water is putrid. It was wet, and it tasted good perhaps at the time, but by the next day they were so sick that they wished they hadn't have done that. They're too sick to even walk on a patrol. They're weak, they have severe diarrhea, they're probably vomiting, and so they were no good for doing the job that they were sent there to do. So they ended up at 1st Med Battalion, and the parasites that they would pick up out of this rice paddy water were life-threatening. They would kill your liver. They would cause you all kinds of long-term problems. It was just horrendous. So the common medication that they use for this is called Tetrachloroethylene. Are you impressed? Tetrachloroethylene was a very potent medicine that would kill any kind of an intestinal parasite, but you had to get it in a good time frame because those parasites were very invasive, and if they migrated out of your colon and got in your bloodstream or into your liver or your pancreas or any of the other abdominal organs, it could be very well too late and you could die of that. So the tetrachloroethylene, or TCE as we called it, was 5 horse pills. They were big. And the little ward that I was working on was strategically located next to the toilets. That's a whole nother story. The toilets were nothing but plywood with a half of a 5-gallon or a 50-gallon drum underneath it. And when we gave these 5 TCE pills to these horribly sick people, they had to be quick to the toilet. And that's why we were right next to them. So every day there would be some flunky Marine that had messed up, that his job that day was to pull the containers out and pour fuel oil in it and burn them. I mean, it was heavy black smoke, and if the wind happened to be in the wrong direction that day, it was absolutely horrible. So anyway, that's what we did on a daily basis, and it saved a lot of lives, and it saved a lot of suffering. Now, during the quiet times, I was able to go down to triage, and if they had a medevac coming in, I could get involved with that. And that was great experience for me, because who knows what was coming out of the rice paddies. Some Marine that had stepped in a punji steak or stepped on a landmine and blew his foot off, or got shot by a Viet Cong sniper. You never knew what was coming in. And so I got a second-hand exposure to that stuff, and it was very valuable to me. Not only that, but I was able to learn how to start IVs on people that were in shock, and that paid off big time when I would get to my final destination with 1st Recon. Because if you didn't have the ability to start an IV on the top of a desolate mountain on some poor Marine that was dying, you were not going to save his life. So I learned very well how to do that, and I was glad I did. So when a Marine comes in on the Medevac, they take his pack, they take his weapon, they take his cartridge belt with grenades on it. All they leave him with is the clothes that he's got on. No kind of weapons or anything that can be used if this guy goes berserk or something. So all other stuff is put in a pile, and then it's inventoried, and then they try to get it back to him when he's going back to his unit. Well, this one day, there was a corpsman that was ready to go home the next day, and he came down to the ward that I was on. He says, "Hey, Pete, look at this. Look at this beautiful pistol I got." It was a Smith & Wesson 38 revolver. He says, "I can't take it home with me. Do you want to buy it?" I said, "Yeah, it's beautiful. How much do you want?" $20. Oh, I had $20, so I bought it. And the next day, I brought it down to the ward, and I was showing my buddy this pistol. And it turns out that one of the patients in there said, "Hey, that looks like my pistol." "No kidding." I said, "I just bought it yesterday." He said, "I've got the serial number." And sure enough, it was that Marine's pistol. And we went and got the first sergeant and told him I didn't want to get in trouble. What I did was not illegal, but there was obviously a theft involved in this. So the first sergeant came down and talked to the Marine and verified that it was his, and he talked to me. He tried to not give me the benefit of the doubt. He thought that I had gone out to the triage pile and stolen it. And I told him the name of the corpsman that I bought it from, and that corpsman went back to the States today. And it's just hard to believe that kind of thing would happen in the middle of a war when you're trying to help your buddy out and stay alive. Well, they obviously gave the pistol back to the Marine who owned it, and they sent paperwork on to Okinawa, because every corpsman that rotated back to the States at the end of their tour spent at least a week at Okinawa. This poor guy got in big trouble, and he lost some rank and had a big fine, and they commended me for being honest and not putting up a fuss and all this stuff. So that made me feel pretty good. I'm not a thief, I know that. It's always bothered me that people would do that kind of stuff. Anyway, my time at Charlie Med, 1st Med Battalion, was coming close. It was almost into March now, and pretty soon orders came down reassigning me to Delta Company, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division, Reinforced, Vietnam. I had my orders, and I was happy that I could get the unit that I wanted to go to. And so the day came, and I had my bag packed, and they drove me down to 1st Recon to Camp Reasoner, and I was introduced to the head corpsman down there, and he said, "Pete, we're not going to keep you in Da Nang. We have another contingency in Chulai that is in dire need of a corpsman." "Oh," I said, "that doesn't sound real good. In dire need." He said, "No, the corpsman you're going to replace was badly wounded. He survived, but it was only due to the stuff that he taught his Marines in his platoon that saved his life. It kind of made me shiver. What am I getting into here? So he said, you'll spend the night here, you'll sleep in the aid station. Tomorrow we'll take you down and you can find a plane going to Chulai and they'll deliver you down there. I've never had any responsibility like this. I have to go down to the flight line and find a plane that can take me to Chulai? Oh, well, hey, maybe I'm growing up a little bit. So I finally found a cargo plane that was heading to Chulai, and I could get on it. And that was early afternoon. It was an old wreck of a plane, but it still flew. And we took off, and it wasn't so hot yet, early in March. But when that plane took off, it wasn't compressed. I mean, it was free-flowing air through it, and it actually got cold. So we landed in Chulai, and I went over to the little building there, and I talked to this guy, and he says, well, you got to get on the horn and see if you can ring up the first Recon. Start from the beginning. Oh. Am I on?
You're on.
Oh, I'm on.